One entered the college walking over towards her class, passing all the chitter chatter of the students. Watching them together and happy in their groups, something about it teared her heart open and left it void deep inside. Vine had been feeling increasingly overwhelmed for days. Between her assignments, a stressful part time job, and the gnawing feeling from her friends, the breaking point came. As she walked to her class and advanced towards her seat, she overheard her friends Harry and Minji laughing about a party she had not been invited to. The realization of being left out and having certainly no one else as a friend was hitting her hard. Being left out was surely a terrible feeling. She tried to push her thoughts away, but her hands started to shake and her eyes started tearing up. She was not weak, but it truly was one terrible feeling to break her down. Her breathing became shallow and she could feel the familiar rush of panic rising. She clenched her fists, trying to ground herself, but it wasn't working. Her heart was racing and her vision was starting to swim. That's when she noticed him. Jungkook was settled at the back of the classroom as he was always, alone and silent. He was the kind of guy like everyone noticed, but no one dared to approach. He held a dangerous aura that forced people away. One look from him and they would cry in fear. But Vine had always been curious about him, drawn to the mystery that surrounded him. He never spoke in class, never participated, yet his presence was undeniable. Even now, as her world started to spin out of control, she found her eyes locking onto his. Jungkook was staring right at her, his dark eyes unwavering. The walls began to close in, and Vine knew she needed to get out of here. She bolted from her seat, stumbling slightly as she made her way out of the classroom. Vine found herself in an empty corridor. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold floor. She buried her face in her hands, trying to steady her breathing, but the panic was relentless. The pain in her heart kept increasing. Hey! A deep voice cut through the silence. Vine froze. She knew that voice. It was the one she had never heard up close, but had imagined countless times. She slowly lifted her head to find Jungkook standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Vine, her voice broke. She wasn't sure what she was trying to say or why he was even here. Jungkook took a step closer, then another, until he was kneeling in front of her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her with those intense eyes of his. For a moment, Vine wondered if she should be afraid, but there was something in his gaze that told her she was not in danger. Not from him. Jungkook, breathe. Just focus on your breathing, he said softly, surprisingly enough. Wine nodded, trying to do as he said. She took a deep breath, then another, but it was not the working. The panic was too strong. Her chest felt tight. Jungkook sprang forward as he watched her struggle. He seemed to be thinking something. Then, before Wine could process what was happening, he leaned in closer. His warm breath brushed against her ear as he whispered, "Trust me." Without waiting for a response, Jungkook moved to the other side of her neck. Wine's eyes widened as she felt his lips press against her skin, just below her ear. It was a gentle kiss, soft and lingering, but it sent a shockwave through her system. The panic that had gripped her so tightly suddenly loosened, replaced by a warmth that spread throughout her entire body. Wine. Jungkook? She breathed out his name, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. She could feel his lips move against her skin as he whispered, "Jungkook, keep breathing." She did as he instructed, focusing on the sensation of his lips against her neck, the warmth of his body so close to hers. She didn't understand how or why it was working, but it was. Jungkook pulled back slightly. "Jungkook, better?" he asked quietly, his voice still low and soothing. "Wine, yeah, I think so." Jungkook, do you get panic attacks often? Wine, not really, it's just today was different. Jungkook, you should be around someone when it happens. Wine, I didn't want to bother anyone. I didn't think anyone would notice. Jungkook, I noticed. Next time, find me. Wine blinked at him in surprise. The idea of relying on Jungkook, the most fair guy in the college, was something she had never considered. But then again, no one else had noticed. No one else had followed her and calmed her the way he just had. Wine, why? Why would you help me? Jungkook looked at her, his gaze softening. Jungkook, because I know what it's like to feel like the world is closing in on you. That's when she realized he was not simply dangerous. Those who stay quiet understand things a little better than others. Wine, thank you. Wine said softly, her eyes meeting his. Jungkook gave her a small nod, then stood up, offering her his hand. Jungkook, come on, let's get you out of here. Wine took his hand as he pulled her up to her feet. She couldn't help but feel safe in his presence. Without another word, Jungkook led her towards a small courtyard at the back of their college. The trees provided shade. They settled on the bench, a comfortable silence stretching between them. Wine watched as Jungkook leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment, as if he was savoring the quiet. Why? You always avoid talking to people, but you help me. Why? He opened his eyes, yet they stayed stuck to the sky. Jungkook, I noticed you, Wine, a long time ago. You're different from everyone else. You don't pretend to be something you're not, and you're not afraid to care, even when it hurts you. Wine's heart skipped a beat at his words. She hadn't expected such an honest confession. Wine, why didn't you say anything ever? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook, because I didn't want to mess it up. I'm not good at this, at letting people in. But when I saw you today struggling, I just couldn't stay back anymore. Jungkook, I like you, Wine, more than I should, and it scares me because I don't know how to be with someone without pushing them away. For a moment, Wine was too stunned to speak. She had always seen Jungkook as distant, untouchable, but hearing his confession made her realize just how vulnerable he really was. She could see the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty, and it made her want to reach out and reassure him. Ryan, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Jungkook looked down at their joined hands, his thumb gently brushing against her skin. It was such a small, simple touch, but it made Ryan's heart race. Jungkook, what if I mess it up? Ryan, then we'll figure it out together. Jungkook, together? Jungkook repeated for the first time. Ryan saw a smile flashing his lips. She nodded with determination. Jungkook hesitated for a moment longer, then leaned in, his eyes searching hers for any sound of doubt. When he found none, he closed the distance, pressing his lips to hers in a soft, lingering kiss. It was gentle, almost tentative, but filled with a sincerity that made Ryan's heart flutter. When they finally pulled back, Jungkook rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her lips. Jungkook, thank you for not giving up on me. Ryan, I never would. I'm not going anywhere, Jungkook. In that moment, Ryan realized how lonely his life must have been to be afraid of letting people in anymore. He was not only dangerous but lethal for her health, and all she wanted was to uncover him further. As they sat together in the quiet courtyard, it felt like the world had finally fallen into place. The walls that Jungkook had built around himself were beginning to crumble, and Ryan knew that, together, they could find a way to be something more.